The phone call came at 2:47 a.m., and I knew before I answered that it was bad. No one calls at that hour with good news. My hand fumbled across the nightstand, knocking over a half-empty water glass that had been there since Tuesday. The screen's blue light burned my eyes in the darkness of my studio apartment, and for a split second, I considered not answering. Considered letting it ring into the void, considered staying in this moment where everything was still okay, where Maya was still just sleeping peacefully in whatever hospital bed they'd moved her to after the transplant evaluation. But I answered. "Ms. Chen?" The voice was male, young, trying too hard to sound calm. "This is Dr. Reyes from County General. I'm calling about your daughter, Maya." My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I could feel it, that horrible pause between beats that stretches into infinity. "What happened?" My voice came out steady. Years of nursing had trained me for this, the ability to sound composed when everything inside was screaming. I was already out of bed, already pulling on jeans with one hand, phone pressed against my ear so hard it hurt. "She's stable right now, but her kidney function has deteriorated significantly in the last 4 hours. Her creatinine levels have jumped to 8.2, and she's showing signs of fluid overload. We've started her on emergency dialysis," but he paused, and in that pause I heard everything he wasn't saying. "Dr. Morrison wants you here. Now." I was out the door in 3 minutes, didn't bother with a coat even though November in Chicago bit through cotton like it had teeth. The streets were empty, slick with that half-frozen rain that wasn't quite snow yet, and my Honda Civic coughed twice before starting. The engine light had been on for 6 weeks. I'd been meaning to get it fixed, had been meaning to do a lot of things, but everything took money, and money was something I hadn't had in 8 months, not since Maya got sick, not since I'd burned through my savings and then my credit and then my dignity, calling everyone I'd ever known to beg for help. Everyone except them. The hospital was 12 minutes away, and I made it in 7. My nursing badge still worked at County General even though I'd been on unpaid leave since August. The night security guard, Marcus, just nodded at me as I ran past. He knew. Everyone knew about Maya. That's what happens in hospitals. Your tragedy becomes institutional knowledge, passed between shifts like patient handoff notes. 4th floor, pediatric ICU. The elevator took forever, and I counted my breaths like they taught us in nursing school. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It didn't help. Nothing helped when your 9-year-old daughter was dying and you were powerless to stop it. Dr. Morrison was waiting outside Maya's room, and the expression on her face told me everything. She was good at her job, one of the best pediatric nephrologists in the state, but she looked tired. We all looked tired these days. "Jen," she said, using my first name because we'd moved past formalities months ago, around the time Maya's kidneys first started failing. "Come with me for a minute before you go in. She's sleeping." We walked to the consultation room, that terrible little space with the comfortable chairs and the box of tissues that might as well have a sign saying "This is where we deliver bad news." I'd been in rooms like this before, on the other side, holding some mother's hand while a doctor explained why her child wasn't going to make it home. "Her kidneys are shutting down faster than we anticipated," Dr. Morrison said, sitting across from me. She had Maya's chart open on her tablet, and I could see the labs even upside down. Everything was wrong: potassium climbing, phosphorus elevated, hemoglobin dropping. The dialysis is keeping her alive, but it's not a solution. It's a bridge. And we're running out of bridge. "How long?" I asked. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." But Jen, she leaned forward, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. There's a potential donor. It came through this evening. Hope flared in my chest, bright and painful. What? Why didn't you call me immediately? Because there's a problem. She pulled up something else on her tablet. The surgery, the anti-rejection medications, the post-op care, the monitoring, we're looking at approximately $847,000 for the first year. Your insurance has already hit its lifetime maximum. They've denied the claim. The number hit me like a physical blow. $847,000. I made $68,000 a year when I was working. Before Maya got sick. Before everything fell apart. There has to be something, I said. Payment plans, charity care, fundraising, we've tried everything. The hospital's charity fund is tapped out. You've already received the maximum assistance. And Jen, she looked at me with something like pity, and I hated it. The donor kidney won't wait. We have 72 hours to accept or decline. After that, it goes to the next person on the list. 72 hours. 3 days to find nearly $1 million. Can I see her? I asked. Maya was small for 9, had always been small, but in the hospital bed surrounded by machines she looked impossibly tiny. They'd put in a new dialysis catheter, and I could see the dressing on her chest, bright white against her pale skin. She'd lost her hair from the treatments, and someone, probably Nurse Rachel who worked nights, had put a pink knit cap on her head. Her favorite color. I pulled the chair close and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, always cold now, and I rubbed them gently between mine. The monitors beeped steadily, each beep a tiny reassurance that she was still here, still fighting. Hey, Mama, she whispered without opening her eyes. She always knew when I was there. Hey, baby girl. How are you feeling? Tired. She shifted slightly, and I saw her wince. The dialysis makes me feel weird. Like I'm full of sand. I know, sweetie. I know. I kissed her forehead, felt how warm it was. Slight fever, probably from the catheter. But you're doing so good. You're so strong. Am I going to get better? She opened her eyes then, and they were huge in her thin face, dark and trusting and full of a hope that broke my heart. The doctors keep saying soon. Is it going to be soon? I couldn't lie to her. Wouldn't. I'm working on it, baby. I promise I'm working on it. She smiled, tiny and tired. You always fix everything, Mama. But I couldn't fix this. I couldn't manufacture $847,000 out of thin air. I'd already sold everything I owned that had any value. My mother's engagement ring had gone in month 3. My car would have been next if I didn't need it to get to the hospital. I'd started a GoFundMe that had raised $23,000, amazing, generous, not even close to enough. There was one option left. One option I'd sworn I'd never take. My phone was heavy in my pocket as I sat there holding Maya's hand. I knew the number by heart even though I'd deleted it from my contacts 2 years ago. Had deleted it and blocked it and promised myself I'd never, ever call it again. But that was before. Before Maya got sick. Before I'd exhausted every other possibility. Before my daughter's life came down to 72 hours and a number I'd sworn I'd never dial. I waited until Maya fell back asleep, adjusted her blankets, kissed her one more time. Then I walked out into the hallway, past the nurse's station where Rachel gave me a sympathetic look, past the waiting room where a father sat with his head in his hands, all the way to the stairwell where it was quiet and cold and no one could hear me. The phone rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Jennifer? My mother's voice was cautious, surprised. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. Since I'd told her exactly what I thought about spending $250,000 on my younger sister's dream wedding while I worked double shifts to pay rent. Is everything okay? No. My voice cracked, and I hated how weak it sounded. Mom, I need help. Maya needs help. There was a pause. What kind of help? I closed my eyes, pressed my forehead against the cold concrete wall. She needs a kidney transplant. We found a donor, but insurance won't cover it. The words stuck in my throat like glass. I need money. A lot of money. How much? $847,000. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, Jennifer, that's impossible. Where would we get that kind of money? Something hot and furious rose in my chest. You spent $250,000 on Melissa's wedding 6 months ago. Ice sculptures and a 12-piece band in flowers imported from fucking Ecuador. You had a caviar station, Mom. A caviar station. That was different. My daughter is dying. My voice echoed in the stairwell, too loud, too raw. She's 9 years old and her kidneys are failing and she has 72 hours to live without this transplant, and you're telling me it's different? Jen, please try to understand. That money is gone. We spent it. The wedding, and then your father's retirement party, and we have the house renovations, sell something. I was begging now, didn't care. Refinance the house. Take out loans. You're sitting in a 4-bedroom house with a pool in Naperville while your granddaughter is hooked up to machines just to stay alive. I'll talk to your father, she said finally. But Jen, I can't promise anything. That's a lot of money. 72 hours, I said. That's all the time we have. I hung up before she could respond, before I could say something I couldn't take back. My hands were shaking. Everything was shaking. I didn't go back to Maya's room right away. Couldn't. Instead, I sat on the cold stairs and cried the way I'd been holding back for months, huge gasping sobs that hurt my chest and made my throat raw. I cried for Maya, for the unfairness of a world where children got sick and parents had to beg for their lives. I cried for myself, for the exhaustion and fear and helplessness. And I cried because I knew, deep in my bones, that my mother wasn't going to help. They'd spent $250,000 on a wedding, on flowers and food and champagne that got consumed in 4 hours and turned into nothing but photos and memories. My sister Melissa, who'd always been the favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. She'd married Brandon Hartwell, whose family owned half the car dealerships in the Chicago suburbs, and my parents had wanted to impress them, wanted to show that the Chin family was just as sophisticated, just as wealthy. Never mind that they'd had to drain their savings to do it. Never mind that I'd called my mother 2 weeks before the wedding, when Maya first got her diagnosis, when the medical bills were just starting to pile up, and asked if they could loan me $10,000 to cover the gap in insurance. Never mind that my mother had said, "We just can't right now, honey. You understand." With the wedding coming up. I'd understood. I'd understood perfectly. The wedding had been beautiful, I'd heard. I hadn't gone. Couldn't bear to watch them throw money around like confetti while I was calculating whether I could afford Maya's prescriptions and groceries in the same week. Melissa had sent me pictures anyway, the ice sculpture that looked like swans, the champagne tower, her dress that cost more than I made in 3 months. She'd looked happy. Radiant. Like someone who'd never had to choose between medication and rent. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother: "Talk to your father tomorrow. Try to get some sleep." Not a promise. Not even close to a promise. I pulled myself together, washed my face in the bathroom sink until my eyes were less red, and went back to Maya's room. She was still sleeping, chest rising and falling with that mechanical steadiness that meant the ventilator was helping her breathe. When had they intubated her? I'd only been gone 20 minutes. Rachel was in the room, checking vitals. She looked at me, and I saw the answer in her face. Her oxygen saturation started dropping, Rachel said quietly. Dr. Reyes made the call. It's just temporary, to give her lungs a rest. Temporary. Everything was temporary now. Temporary measures, temporary solutions, temporary life. I spent the night in that chair, holding Maya's hand, listening to the machines breathe for her. I watched the numbers on the monitors, tracked every vital sign with the trained eye of a nurse who knew exactly what she was seeing. Blood pressure dropping. Heart rate climbing. Potassium still too high. Her body was giving up, shutting down one system at a time. By morning, I'd made a decision. If my parents wouldn't help, I'd find another way. I'd find 100 other ways. I'd sell my blood, my plasma, my fucking organs if I had to. I'd rob a bank. I'd do whatever it took. But first, I'd give them one more chance. I called my father at 7 a.m., right when I knew he'd be having his morning coffee in the kitchen of their perfect suburban house. He answered on the second ring. Jenny? He still called me that, like I was 6 years old. Your mother told me about Maya. I'm so sorry, honey. I need your help, Dad. I kept my voice steady, professional. I need you to take out a home equity loan. Or liquidate your retirement accounts. Whatever it takes. Maya has 72 hours. He sighed, that disappointed dad sigh I'd heard my whole childhood. Jenny, you have to understand. We're not in a position to do that right now. We have obligations, mortgages, you spent $250,000 on Melissa's wedding. That was different. That was planned, budgeted. This is my daughter's life. I understand you're upset, do you? My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. Do you understand what it's like to watch your child die because you can't afford to save her? Do you understand what it's like to know that if you had more money, if you came from a different family, if you'd made different choices, she'd be fine? That's not fair, Jenny. No, what's not fair is that you could help and you're choosing not to. What's not fair is that caviar and ice sculptures and a 12-piece band were more important than your granddaughter's life. We can't just, yes, you can. I was yelling now, didn't care who heard me. You absolutely can. You just don't want to. Because it's inconvenient. Because it would mean downsizing, or working a few more years before retirement, or God forbid, admitting that you made a choice and it was the wrong one. Jennifer Chin, that is enough. The full name. The tone that meant I'd crossed a line. I'd heard it before, when I'd gotten pregnant at 23 with a man I wasn't married to, when I'd dropped out of pre-med to go into nursing instead, when I'd made any choice that disappointed them. You're right, I said. It is enough. Don't bother coming to the funeral. I hung up. My hands were shaking again. The sun was coming up outside the window, pale November light that did nothing to warm the room. Maya was still unconscious, still being breathed by machines, still dying. I had 72 hours to find $847,000. The morning was a blur of phone calls. I called every charity organization I could find. I called the hospital's financial aid office for the 4th time. I called the Kidney Foundation. I called loan companies that specialized in medical debt. I raised my GoFundMe goal from $100,000 to $1 million and shared it everywhere I could think of. I called news stations, thinking maybe if Maya's story went viral, if people saw her face, saw how young she was, no one wanted to do a story about medical debt. It was too common, too depressing. Everyone has a sick kid who needs money, one producer told me. We'd run that story every day if we covered them all. By noon, I'd raised an additional $7,000 on GoFundMe. By 3 p.m., another $4,000. It was something. It was nowhere close to enough. Dr. Morrison found me in the cafeteria, where I was drinking burned coffee and trying to figure out if I could sell my apartment. I didn't own it, I rented, but maybe I could sublet, maybe I could, Jen. She sat down across from me. We need to talk about comfort care. My stomach dropped. No. If we can't move forward with the transplant, we're going to move forward. I'm getting the money. Jen, it's been 24 hours. You have 48 hours left, and even if you get the money, we need time to schedule the surgery, prep Maya. I said no. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I'm not giving up on her. I'm not. She stood too, put a hand on my arm. I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking you to think about what Maya would want. If she's suffering, she's 9 years old. She wants to live. She wants to grow up and go to high school and get her driver's license and go to college and have babies of her own someday. That's what she wants. I know. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle. I know. But if we can't give her that, maybe we can give her peace. I pulled away from her. I have 48 hours. A lot can happen in 48 hours. But as the day wore on, as the sun set and Maya stayed unconscious and my phone stayed silent, I started to understand what Dr. Morrison was really saying. I was going to lose her. My daughter was going to die because I couldn't afford to save her. Because in this country, in this supposedly great nation, your child's life was worth exactly what you could pay for it. Because I'd made the mistake of being poor and Maya was going to pay the price. I sat in that chair next to her bed and held her hand and tried to memorize everything about her. The way her fingers curved. The small scar on her wrist from when she'd fallen off her bike at 6. The freckles across her nose that she'd gotten from me. I tried to store it all up, tried to keep her with me, because soon this would be all I had left. My phone rang at 11 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Is this Jennifer Chen? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Yes. This is Amanda Rosenberg. I'm an attorney representing Melissa and Brandon Hartwell. I'm calling regarding a potential arrangement that might benefit your daughter Maya. My heart started pounding. What kind of arrangement? I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone. Can you meet with us tomorrow morning? 9 a.m.? I'll text you the address. Who's U.S.? My sister? I really can't say more right now. Will you be there? I looked at Maya, at her small still form in the bed. 48 hours left. Less than that now. I'll be there, I said. The address turned out to be a law office in downtown Chicago, glass and steel and expensive art on the walls. I'd taken a shower at the hospital, changed into the cleanest clothes I had, tried to look like someone who belonged in a place like this. I didn't. I looked like exactly what I was, a single mother running on no sleep and desperation. Amanda Rosenberg was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with perfect hair and a suit that probably cost more than my rent. She ushered me into a conference room where Melissa and Brandon were already sitting. I hadn't seen my sister in person since before the wedding. She looked good, she always looked good, with her blonde highlights and her tasteful jewelry and her expression of carefully practiced concern. Brandon sat next to her, his hand on her knee, looking uncomfortable. Jennifer. Melissa half stood, like she was going to hug me, then seemed to think better of it. Thank you for coming. I stayed standing. Why am I here? Amanda gestured to a chair. Please, sit. We have a proposal that we think could work for everyone involved. I sat. Folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. We understand your daughter needs a transplant, Amanda said. And that you lack the financial resources to proceed. My clients are prepared to cover the full cost of Maya's surgery and first-year care. The room spun. What? All $847,000, Melissa said. She was using her soft voice, the one she used when she wanted something. We want to help, Jenny. She's our niece. Why now? My voice came out harsh. You've known she was sick for months. Where was this offer when I was begging Mom and Dad for help? Melissa and Brandon exchanged a look. Amanda cleared her throat. There are conditions, she said. And there it was. The catch. There was always a catch. What conditions? Amanda slid a document across the table. Brandon was recently diagnosed with kidney disease himself. Stage 4. He needs a transplant within the next year, possibly sooner. I stared at her. Then at Brandon, who had the decency to look ashamed. Then at my sister. You want me to give him one of my kidneys, I said flatly. We want to propose a fair exchange, Amanda said. Your daughter gets her transplant, fully funded. In return, you undergo testing to see if you're a match for Brandon. If you are, you donate one kidney. All your medical expenses for the donation will be covered, plus a recovery stipend of $50,000. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out bitter and sharp. Let me get this straight. You spent $250,000 on a wedding. You've known for months that Maya was dying. You watched me beg and struggle and sell everything I owned. And now you're offering to save my daughter's life if I give up part of my body? It's not like that, Melissa said. She was crying, perfect tears that didn't mess up her makeup. Jenny, please. Brandon is sick. He's really sick. And you're the only family member who might be a match. We had you tested, you had me tested? Without my consent? There was a sample at County General from when you donated blood last year. That's illegal. I looked at Amanda. You know that's illegal, right? The sample was destroyed, Amanda said smoothly. But yes, it did indicate a high probability of compatibility. However, that test wouldn't hold up in court, and we're not claiming it would. We're simply saying that genetic testing suggests you would be an ideal candidate. I stood up. This is insane. You're trying to blackmail me into giving up my kidney. We're offering a solution that helps everyone, Amanda said. Maya gets her transplant. Brandon gets his. You receive financial compensation and the knowledge that you've saved 2 lives instead of 1. And if I say no? Silence. Melissa looked down at her hands. Brandon stared at the table. Amanda's expression didn't change. Then Maya doesn't get her transplant, I said. That's what you're telling me. Save your husband or watch my daughter die. That's not, Melissa started. That's exactly what this is. I slammed my hand on the table, and they all jumped. You're holding my daughter's life hostage. You're saying she's only worth saving if I give you what you want. We're offering you a choice, Amanda said. No one is forcing you to do anything. A choice. Like it was really a choice. Like any mother in the world would choose differently. I need to think about it, I said. We need an answer by tomorrow, Amanda said. The kidney for Maya won't wait longer than that. How convenient, I said. That you happened to find me right at the deadline. Melissa's face flushed. We were trying to figure out how to approach you. This isn't easy for us either. No, I'm sure it's been very difficult for you. Having to actually consider helping your sister for once. That's not fair. You've never. My voice broke. You got everything. The perfect wedding, the perfect house, the perfect life. And I got medical bills and a dying daughter and parents who care more about impressing your in-laws than saving their granddaughter's life. Jenny, please. Melissa was really crying now. I love Maya. I do. And I love Brandon. I can't lose him. Can't you understand that? I understood. I understood that she'd found a way to save her husband and let me pay the price. I understood that my kidney was worth more to my family than my daughter's life had been. I understood everything perfectly. I'll give you my answer tomorrow, I said, and walked out. I drove back to the hospital in a daze. The city blurred past me, gray and cold and indifferent. People were going about their lives, buying coffee and going to work and complaining about traffic, and Maya was dying and I was being asked to choose between my body and my daughter. It wasn't a choice. It had never been a choice. But God, I wanted it to be. I wanted to be able to say no. To tell them all to go to hell, to find their own donor, to suffer the way I'd been suffering. I wanted to make them feel what I felt, the helplessness, the rage, the bone-deep unfairness of it all. But I couldn't. Because Maya deserved to live more than I deserved revenge. Dr. Morrison found me in Maya's room an hour later. I was just sitting there, watching my daughter breathe, watching the machines keep her alive. The attorney called, she said. They've asked us to prepare for Maya's surgery. They said you'd be giving us an answer tonight. They're going to pay for it, I said. My voice sounded far away. All of it. In exchange for my kidney. Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's illegal, Jen. Selling organs, I'm not selling it. I'm donating it. To my brother-in-law. Who happens to be married to my sister. Who happens to be paying for my daughter's transplant. Totally separate transactions. The ethics board would never, the ethics board isn't watching my daughter die. I looked at her. Would you do it? If it was your kid? She looked at Maya, then back at me. Yes, she said quietly. I would. Then help me. Please. She nodded slowly. I'll need to run compatibility tests. Real ones. If you're not actually a match, this won't work anyway. I'm a match. I know I am. I could feel it, some horrible certainty in my gut. Of course I was a match. Of course this was going to work. The universe wouldn't have offered me this choice if it wasn't going to work. They drew my blood that night. Ran the tests. By morning, Dr. Morrison confirmed what I already knew. Perfect match. 6 out of 6 antigens. I was an ideal donor. I called Amanda Rosenberg at 8 a.m. I'll do it, I said. But I have conditions too. I'm listening. Maya's surgery happens first. She gets the kidney, she gets through recovery, she's stable. Then and only then will I donate to Brandon. That could be months, those are my terms. Maya first. And I want everything in writing. A contract that says if anything happens to me during the surgery, Maya's care continues to be covered. College fund, therapy, everything. You're not just buying a kidney. You're buying her whole future. There was a pause. Muffled conversation. Then, agreed. I'll have the contracts drawn up today. One more thing. My voice was hard. I never want to see Melissa again. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not at any family event ever. She's dead to me. You tell her that. Jennifer, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Another pause. I'll pass that along. They scheduled Maya's surgery for 36 hours later. Rushed, emergency priority, all hands on deck. The donor kidney came from a 23-year-old who died in a car accident, and I spent 3 hours before the surgery thinking about that person, about their family, about how someone else's tragedy was saving my daughter's life. I wasn't allowed in the operating room. Had to wait in the surgical waiting area like every other terrified parent, watching the clock and drinking bad coffee and trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. Dr. Morrison came out every hour to update me. They'd started. The kidney was viable. They were connecting the renal artery. Blood flow established. Kidney was producing urine, a good sign, meant it was working. 6 hours. That's how long it took. 6 hours of my life that I aged approximately 6 years during. When Dr. Morrison finally came out and said, she's okay. The kidney is functioning. She's going to be okay, I collapsed. Just crumpled to the floor right there in the waiting room and sobbed into my hands while strangers pretended not to notice. Maya woke up 2 days later. Still groggy, still in pain, but alive. Actually, truly alive for the first time in months. Mama? Her voice was raspy from the breathing tube. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Did it work? Did I get the kidney? Yes, sweetie. It worked. You're going to be okay. She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. I knew you'd fix it. I knew you would. I held her hand and kissed her forehead and tried not to think about what I'd promised to do. Tried not to think about how in 6 weeks, when Maya was stable and recovering well, they'd be coming to collect their payment. The weeks passed in a blur of recovery and physical therapy and monitoring anti-rejection medications. Maya got stronger every day. Color came back to her cheeks. Her appetite returned. She started asking about when she could go back to school, about whether she'd missed too much fourth grade, about if she could try out for soccer team in the spring. She was going to live. My daughter was going to live. And all it cost was a piece of myself. Brandon's surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks after Maya's. They called it a directed living donation, which was the legal term for what I was doing. I had to meet with a social worker who asked me about 10 different times if I was being coerced. I lied every time. Said no, this was my choice, I wanted to help my brother-in-law, family helping family. The social worker looked skeptical but signed off anyway. I think she knew. I think everyone knew. But Maya's surgery was already done, the money already spent, and me backing out now wouldn't change anything except leave Brandon to die too. I didn't see Melissa before the surgery. True to my word, I'd cut her out completely. She sent me texts that I deleted without reading. Called from numbers I blocked. My mother called too, crying, begging me to reconsider, to not tear the family apart. I told her the family had torn itself apart the moment they chose a wedding over their granddaughter's life. The night before my surgery, I sat with Maya in her hospital room. She was doing well enough now that she'd be discharged in a few days, moving to outpatient care. She was reading a book, some middle-grade novel about dragons, and she looked so normal, so healthy, so alive that my heart ached. "Mama, why do you have to have surgery too?" she asked, looking up from her book. I'd told her I was donating a kidney to a sick family member. Hadn't told her who. Couldn't bear to explain the whole ugly truth. "Because someone needs help," I said. "And I can help them." "But won't you miss your kidney?" "People can live perfectly well with one kidney." "I'll be fine." "Will it hurt?" "A little. But it's worth it." She thought about this for a moment. "Like how you always say some things are worth doing even when they're hard." Exactly like that. She hugged me then, careful of her incision site but fierce anyway. "You're the best mama in the whole world." I held her and tried to memorize the feeling. Tried to hold on to this moment before everything changed. The surgery took 4 hours. They used laparoscopic technique, small incisions and a camera, and when I woke up I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Everything hurt, my abdomen, my back, my chest from where they'd had the breathing tube. They gave me morphine, but it barely touched the pain. Dr. Reyes came by to check on me. "Surgery went perfectly. Your kidney was healthy, good size, ideal for transplant. Brandon is in recovery now." The kidney started producing urine immediately. "Great," I said. My voice was hoarse. "Can I see Maya?" "Tomorrow. You need to rest today." But I couldn't rest. Couldn't stop thinking about what I'd done. Couldn't stop feeling the absence of something that had been inside me my whole life. It was stupid, I knew it was stupid, but I felt violated somehow. Like they'd taken something without permission even though I'd signed all the consent forms. I'd saved Maya. That was what mattered. She was alive and